When I was 9 years old, I got a hamster for a present. And that hamster, I baptized it Goldie. Not knowing, I didn't have any clue what I would do later on. I'm just telling part of my youth between the age of 9 and 14, when I had this little hamster that I took everywhere with me. His favorite spot was here under my armpit. One day it was discovered in school and I had to leave it home, and my mom was okay with me having a female hamster, so at least there was a couple, and then I had babies. What a miracle. And then, well, the first, miracle, I say miracle, but it was also a bit of a traumatic experience because I was so curious and wanted to look at these babies all the time, and I didn't know that rats are quite protective, and mothers often, when feeling threatened by external factors, actually cannibalize on their babies. So my very first experience with a litter of hamsters was the mother biting off the heads of these babies, and I was like, and I was 10 years old then. However, the second litter, I managed to stay a bit away and let that happen, and discovered when these came out of this cigar box that I built for them, where they could have this little nest. I couldn't keep them though, and bringing them to the pet shop, the owner of the pet shop said like, "Oh, what, you have 4 hamsters? Well, here is 20 Belgian francs, you know." That was in Belgium at the time before the euro. And I thought like, wow, business. And then I saw he had also squirrels and rats and mice and gerbils and all kinds of rodents. So I developed a kind of breeding program in my bedroom. And by the age of 14, I tried all kinds of rodents, and I have to tell you, the rats were the most social, the most intelligent. They were the most adaptive, the nicest creatures, really, the most, well, really, in many ways. Because I'm pretty sure some of you don't like rats, probably most of you. Who doesn't like rats here? Wow, indeed, like, who does like rats? Who likes rats? Minority, but still like 1/3. Well, I'm going to ask this question again at the end of my talk, and I hope that the 1/3 of likers will grow to 2/3, right? Okay, that's my ambition for this talk. And why should we appreciate rats? Well, actually, historically, we could see rats as the most, from a taxonomic point of view at least, as the most successful species on the planet. They have diversified in more mammal subspecies than any other group, any other category in the kingdom of mammals. More than 40% of all mammal species are some kind of rodent, varying from a tiny desert mouse the size of my fingernail in Australia, to the capybara, which can grow up to the size of a big dog in Amazonian forest. Traditionally, they have lived on all continents apart from Antarctica, and they always lived in symbiosis with humans. They have cleaned up our mess, and in contrary to appreciating that, we humans have all the time given them they were the reason for the plague. Well, actually that was not. It was the fleas on the rats which were the vector for the plague. But we accused the rats. Rats are actually, and you have to stop me if I become too lyric, but rats have an extremely keen sense of smell. They have a higher ratio of neural connections allocated to olfaction than any other species. More than dogs. Yet, they're easier to train. Around over 80% of their perception comes from olfaction. They're very convenient, and that's probably why they have been used in so much cognitive research, in pharmaceutical research, and so on. Behavioral research, because you simply can have lots of rats in a small space with relatively little care, some food and relatively little health care. When I was traveling in Mozambique and I saw these communities, these vulnerable communities, subsistence farmers in remote areas who actually lived grouped around the town in a refugee camp, and not only them, but their children and their grandchildren all together, dependent on food aid, I thought this was a fundamental injustice. These people could never make it to clear that landmine problem by themselves. They were totally dependent on expensive imported know-how and goods to tackle this problem. And probably because of my love for rats, that's the innovation I think was there, the connecting of rats, the nose of rats as a technology, and the need of these communities to be empowered to tackle that scourge, really, which is landmines, a structural barrier to any development. So, okay, we go to rats, and we chose the African giant pouch rat as a wonderful species. They live up to 8 years. After 9 months of initial training, they can be for many years productive. They're easy to transport, I mean, lots of advantages, and easy to train. They're, for clarity to 2/3 of you who don't like rats, they don't blow up in the process, because some of you might think, oh, that's great, and we get rid of the rats and the landmines at once. No, that's not how it works. We work with total respect for the animals, and the animal welfare component is really important, even in a culture where animal welfare is not so relevant. So this is how they are trained. They systematically walk up and down. When they find a landmine, they scratch on the soil. They get a click sound. It's very simple positive behavioral reinforcement. And in return for this click sound and this scratching on the soil where the landmine is, they get some peanuts and banana. Yeah, they literally work for peanuts. So how do you train these animals? The key is that in evolution, these animals learned that humans are bad, you know? We kill them, and we have always killed them, so they stay away from humans, they stay away from overflying predators. So having an animal walk in the open, systematically searching a field, requires some behavioral change. Very interesting. We use positive behavioral reinforcement, just like you do with small kids. Really, not different from that. At a very early age, when they open their eyes, that's what they look like then. Well, these are already a week older, but we expose them. In this case, this guy has his mobile phone. There's music coming out of his phone. They walk together with these animals. They take the bus with these animals. They expose it to all kinds of strange stimuli that the animals would normally, evolutionarily, be shying away from. But in all these circumstances, they need to learn that humans are friends. This is essential. Making successful HEROrats depends on what bonding can be built. I mean, same thing, so many common points, and it depends on the bonding that can be established between the trainers and their rats. In the next stage, Pavlovian training, they learn to associate a food reinforcer, in this case mashed banana, with a diverse diet of various cereals and so on. So they're brought in this setup. They get a click every few seconds, and immediately after they click, they get a food reinforcer dispensed through this syringe. Again, and then there's a break, nothing happens, maybe a minute, click again, food. Click food, maybe still wait a bit, then 2 clicks at once, a lot of food, this type of thing. Immediately they learn click means food. And that creates a language between animal and trainer. Then they're brought in a cage with 3 holes, like you see here. First of all, I'm not sure you see the 3 holes on the metal plate in front. And we start with 1 hole. And the animal has to learn, that is now operant conditioning, Skinner training, So basically the animal, if it doesn't hear the click anymore in that environment, it starts becoming nervous and wants to do things. As soon as it moves its nose toward the hole, click and food. Then, so next he knows that, okay, I need to move in that direction. It's a bit like the hot and cold game. You know this game, right? Same way. And in the end, after it takes another week before the animal learns that it has to put its nose inside that sniffer hole. And under that sniffer hole, we put a mix of explosives and earth, soil. Then we bring it again in this cage with 3 holes. We open the other holes. And then it's a bit like, you know, this game on the street with the 3 things, the game that you can never win, you know that? But here they do win, actually, because they simply smell under which hole the right odor is put. And again, they put their nose in, click sound, and they build that up for 3 seconds. Then we make it more difficult. We bring them in a setup with 10 holes, and we reduce the number of positives that they can be rewarded on. Then we start an intermittent rewarding scheme. Not for every indication they can actually get a reward, which actually makes the conditioning pattern even more solid. You know that as well. Same works with us, with humans. If, for instance, we have a car that we are used to start with a key, but we know that, well, sometimes our car doesn't start. We will be tempted to try it out more and more and more. Our conditioning pattern of starting the car, of turning the key, we will execute that more and more, even if our car has less tendency to start. Also some interesting lessons there in terms of behavior and interhuman relationships. So for every indication, the animal gets after some time, it only gets reinforcers for some of the indications. Next, it learns to walk in a harness in the open. And initially, we use alternative targets. And in the beginning, there are still many. But on a real minefield, there is in less than 3% of the area, there are actual mines. So where we start with many targets, we reduce these numbers of targets until the animals show a consistent behavior over time, also while the trainers wear their protective gear. So this is a blast-withstanding Kevlar suit. It weighs 9 kilos, which is quite heavy when working in these circumstances. This is tropical area. The animals are supposed to do 800 square meters, and so their distance they cover is built up gradually, and to be able to indicate 5 to 8 targets consistently over months before they are, that's an internal kind of accreditation test they undergo, before they are sent abroad and then submitted to an international mine action standard test according to the same procedures. And then they get a license to work for half a year in the field before they are tested and accredited again for another half year. It's a bit like a driver's license. And it's so wonderful to see this interaction between the trainers and the animals. And it's important to mention also the skills that these trainers gain. You have to know in these environments there is very little work opportunity, employment opportunity. But these guys, they become expert in animal training, in rat training, and these skills are transferable. That's really important. So it's Tanzanian trainers who teach the Mozambican trainers. It's Mozambican trainers who, because of their Portuguese, who are teaching the Angolan trainers. It's Tanzanian trainers who were teaching the Cambodian trainers, the Laotian, the Vietnamese, and so on. So this is really wonderful to see how, for vulnerable communities, this builds dignity, labor, and in the same time has a humanitarian impact. Also nice to mention that because the rats work so fast, in comparison to traditional techniques, just a small unit, a small rat capacity, and here actually is the folks in the rat suits, those are the rat trainers, who can actually support a rather large mine action operation. Combining all these techniques, we can make mine action, because you need all these follow-up techniques, and mine action is highly, where there is a landmine, you really want to get in a secure way rid of it, so they're exploded in situ. It also requires heavy machines that can drive through suspected area without the risk of explosion, and which can withstand the blast. So a small rat unit can actually make a mine action operation much more efficient. Per square meter, where traditionally it's like considered $4 per square meter is the price of mine action, we could bring that down to $1.2. And that made us speed up the entire mine action process in Mozambique considerably. The year before last year, we were able, together with the Mozambican government, to have like a ceremony where we put the last landmine to explosion, and that was fantastic. In reality, there will always be residual minefields and residual landmines left. Even in my own home country, Belgium, which was where the Flanders Westhoek was the most battled area in history, there's still an average of 2 calls per day to the Belgian bomb disposal units of landmines and bombs that remain from First and Second World War. So there is residual minefields left, for sure. What is important, impacting communities, that is really the humanitarian work. So if subsistence farmers can, together with their children and grandchildren, get back to their villages and start a normal life, cultivate their land, that is actually the basic necessity for any development to occur. So where is this work by now? By now, Apopo is an organization with 650 employees in various countries. I'll come back to that. In total, we cleared 104, and this teller is continuously counting on our websites. So over 100,000 explosive devices have been neutralized. Probably 21 something or 22 million square meters of land returned to villagers, and affecting, by now we're over 1 million people, I think, that have been able to return to their villages. That's on the mine action side. You also see detecting TB, and well, now already more than 10,000 people who live with tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis, and who haven't been identified by the standard WHO technology of microscopy, have been identified by the rats. And the implementation of this technology has increased case detection rates by the government service continuously by over 40%. And we have been doing that in, yeah, that's incredible. Huh? If you go to a hospital in Tanzania and you have active TB, the chances that you will be detected are less than half, 48% actually, somewhere ranging between 30 and 70%, depending on the remoteness of the health center that you're reporting to. But it is actually astonishing that these case detection rates are so low. It's better to throw up a coin. You have more chance that you'll be detected, or yeah, than relying on a routine microscopy test. Appalling. Yeah, and that's why we're also rolling this out. In spite of WHO, who, well, and I'll come to the performances of the rats, WHO requires a very high sensitivity and a very high specificity, and rats simply don't have that. Let me tell you how this works. So people report to a health center in a city or a big town with pulmonary complaints, and they produce a sputum sample. They are sent home with another container, and the next morning they're taking another sputum sample. These 2 samples per patient are screened by microscopy. What we do is, with a motorbike, we send around people to collect all these samples from all these hospitals, both the positives and the negatives. They come in, we inactivate all these samples. 30 minutes of heating them at 90 degrees is sufficient to make TB inactive. And then they're put in a setup that, as you just saw, they get rewarded on the positives, but they also indicate quite some negatives. And it's especially these negatives, then we research them again. We first centrifuge these sputa, look at it with a fluorescent microscope, and if still discrepant results with the rats, we use a gene expert to confirm it. But all this together creates a cost-effective health intervention, and that's really what it is about. It's about early detection of TB cases, because every undetected TB case infects up to 15 people per year. In countries like Tanzania and Mozambique and now also Ethiopia, where we have implemented this, people don't have addresses. They have a postbox number. So in order to be able to trace back people, we use mobile phones. And it's really important. It's like somebody like Nuru is, well, she has 36 grandchildren from 5 children, which is not uncommon in a country like Tanzania. She has been 3 times misdiagnosed by a health center, and she was brought into the Apopo lab on a door because she couldn't walk anymore. So they had taken out the door out of the house. Nuru was slim like, well, and now she, in African terms, culturally, when somebody's well in the fat, it's considered healthy. So she's now doing well. Importantly, she was the only earner, or she's the only one within the whole of that family had an income. So she was responsible for 41 people, her kids and her grandkids, for an income. So, and I just mentioned this because of it's not because we can find even one patient, well, that can have actually sometimes impacts up to more than 40 people. On average, there's 5 to 8 people depending on one person. So how good are these rats? Well, in comparison to a routine microscopic test, we did this double-blinded randomized test on 910 samples, and whereas microscopy had a 48% sensitivity, and typically a very high specificity, 97% or 98%, rats on an individual basis, this is the average of 1 rat out of 10 rats, has a sensitivity of 67% and still a relative good specificity of 93%. Now, 67% may be, well, better than these 48%, but still it's not good enough to qualify as a point-of-care test. Now, utilizing multiple animals, we can cumulatively increase that sensitivity, but also cumulatively our false indications will increase, so also our specificity will go down. And that way we can, using 3 animals on every sample, we can somehow build up sensitivity to almost 80%, and specificity comes down to almost 80%, which is insufficient for WHO standards. However, utilizing rats in combination with a highly specific tool, which is microscopy, we can actually reach very high output. And that's how the WHO should see this in an innovative way. High sensitivity combined with a high specificity, providing a cost-effective health intervention, increasing case detection rates by over 40%, proven in 3 different areas in Africa and soon bringing it to Cambodia as well. But that's not how far we are. And as long as we are not there, the means to increase this work are well, too short. While there is the global fund and so on, we simply don't have access to it because we lack the WHO approval. So what is this technology now about, detection rats technology? And of course, the rats are an essential component in there. They're keen nose and the whole conditioning pattern. You could say this is not technology, this is training, all fine, but it works. And in the end, it's about remote scent tracing. So this setup that you saw with 10 samples in could not only be used for detection of tuberculosis, but there is serious evidence utilizing dogs that also diabetes can be screened for. And several cancers have a scent pattern that can be recognized by animals. We also believe that there is, apart from the health applications, both in communicable and non-communicable diseases, there are lots of environmental applications and even customs applications which could have an earned income model. And that Apopo at this stage is a purely humanitarian organization that is impossible to fund by the subsistence villagers, subsistence farmers who benefit from the services, but mainly it's Western governments, United Nations, and philanthropy paying for this. External factors. While we really believe that the future of this, and not for these applications like landmines and TB, but For other more commercially viable applications that we could envisage, the fact that this technology is so cost effective, we could envisage a model where some service delivered to society could actually create sufficient revenue to make that whole balance and create an overflow that actually can increase the humanitarian operations. But we are not there yet. This is currently where Apopo works. We have support offices in Antwerp, Belgium, in Geneva, obviously with mine action and TB, you need an office in Geneva, and in Washington, DC. We also have and really these offices are supported by just a handful of people. In DC, we have 1 employee, in Geneva, we have 2 employees, and in Antwerp, 3 employees. So overall, 6 employees in the north, and against 650 in the south. And in places like Tanzania, also this map needs updating. Ethiopia, Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam are the places where either for landmines or TB rats are being deployed. This story gained a lot of attention and a lot of recognitions. These are our partners, and I mean, like, too many to mention really here now. And yeah, got a lot of rewards and recognition, especially within the social enterprise realm. And these names will come in the second talk, come familiar to you: Skoll, World Economic Forum, so Schwab Foundation, and Ashoka, which lots of credits go to, because these organizations, these networks really have put us on the agenda and trusted us in this approach, and which created a lot more visibility. Together with the media, the HEROrats have an ever-increasing attention from important media. Also, I'd like to mention, so we have a very fun way of approaching fundraising. Actually, they developed this HEROrat support program where people can online actually pull their credit card and adopt a rat and give that as a present for Thanksgiving or for Valentine. It works really good for Valentine. So they to their beloved, they can give a certificate, and yeah. We're also experimenting a bit with merchandise, although personally I don't really like that too much, of culture of stuff. But it's really, I mean, it's better to approach serious humanitarian issues with fun rather than building on the misery. And in our experience, this has worked really well.